Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze the mental health and personality factors that may be at work in the case of Jennifer Pan. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So first I'll go through the timeline of the crime involved here in this case. Then I'll look at the mental health and personality factors. So starting with the timeline, Jennifer Pan was born on June 17, 1986 in Toronto, Canada. She was of Vietnamese descent. Her father's name was Han and her mother's name was Bic. She also had a younger brother named Felix. Her parents had both lived in Vietnam before moving to Canada. They would get married in Toronto and work for an auto parts manufacturer for several years. Jennifer's parents were industrious and careful with their money. They eventually bought a large house and expensive automobiles. Jennifer's parents put a lot of pressure on her to succeed, which has caused many to label them tiger parents. This is a term that refers to parents who put a tremendous amount of pressure on their children to accomplish academic and other types of achievement. It has traditionally been associated with various Asian cultures, but the term can apply to anybody. At the age of 4, Jennifer took piano lessons and went to classes for figure skating. She tore a ligament in her knee, which ended her hopes for becoming an Olympic figure skating champion. Her parents monitored her extracurricular activities with a high level of intensity. They wouldn't let her go out on dates with boys. She couldn't attend dances. She couldn't go to school parties. Jennifer was very successful as a student early on. Her grades started to drop when she went into high school. On several occasions, she falsified her report cards, changing them to reflect straight A's. She lost her early admission to Ryerson University because she failed a calculus class in high school. She told people that she was attending the university, even though she was spending her time teaching people how to play the piano and working in a restaurant. Now, that calculus class wasn't optional, so she didn't finish high school. She was pretending that she did, but she never received her diploma. She went so far as pretending that she won scholarships and saying that she was accepted into the University of Toronto's pharmacology program. She bought pharmacology textbooks and recorded entries in notebooks to make it look like she was taking notes in class. Because of this charade, her parents granted her permission to stay with a friend near the university campus. But in reality, Jennifer was with her boyfriend named Daniel Wong, who of course her parents did not know about. So as Jennifer was saying that she was in college when she wasn't, she added a lie about working as a volunteer at a children's hospital. She didn't have hospital identification, and this made her parents doubt if she really worked there. Her parents eventually figured out that she was lying by following her to work. She was allowed to stay in her house, even though her father was really upset and wanted to kick her out because of this incident. So really the lies were starting to unravel, and the parents were reacting strongly. Her parents made her go back to try to complete high school, and they put a significant number of restrictions on her. She was not allowed to go anywhere except her job as a piano instructor. So this meant no contact with Daniel. Now Daniel became annoyed with the situation. He started dating other people. Not long after this, he became serious about someone named Christine. Jennifer reacted by fabricating stories in an effort to keep her boyfriend's attention and perhaps gain sympathy. She said that several criminals had assaulted her in a sexual manner. Then, a few days later, she told Daniel that Christine sent her a bullet in the mail. This takes us to 2010. Jennifer had a friend of hers introduce her to a young man named Ricardo Duncan. Jennifer wanted Ricardo to kill her father, and she gave him $1,500 to carry out the murder. Ricardo claims that he refused the money. Now, at this point, Jennifer and Daniel were back together, girlfriend and boyfriend, and they devised this strategy to pay $10,000 to a professional hitman, someone who could kill both of Jennifer's parents. Jennifer believed that her parents' death would result in her inheriting $500,000. Jennifer was put in touch with a man named Lenford Roy Crawford by her boyfriend. Crawford then contacted a man named Eric Sean Carty. Eric then contacted a man named David Milvaganam. So now the plan was in place. We moved to November 8, 2010. Jennifer was at her parents' house, and her parents were there with her. Felix, her brother, was not there. At 9:35 p.m., David called Jennifer and they spoke for about 2 minutes. Jennifer then went downstairs to say goodnight to her parents. When she was down there, she unlocked the front door to the house. At 10:02 p.m., Jennifer turned a light on in the upstairs study. This was a signal that had been prearranged with her conspirators. At 10:05 p.m., David once again called Jennifer, and they spoke for about 3.5 minutes. Not long after this, David, Lenford, and Eric walked through the front door of Jennifer's house. They confronted Bick, and one of them went upstairs and confronted Han. Eric tied Jennifer to a banister as David and Lenford took Bick and Han to the basement, covering their heads with blankets. They shot Han in the shoulder and in the face. Bick was shot 3 times in the head. Jennifer's father would survive this attack, but her mother would not. Jennifer called emergency services. She said that she had been tied up but managed to free herself. Around this time, her father woke up after being shot and made his way outside, encountering a neighbor who also called the police. The police interviewed Jennifer 3 times. There were quite a few reasons to be suspicious of Jennifer. Why did the intruders not have any tools for breaking into the house? Why did they leave her alive? How was she able to dial the phone? Although I think she demonstrated how she could accomplish this fairly well later on. Why didn't the intruders steal Han's car? The keys were sitting in plain sight. They also left behind other property they could have easily stolen. After Han woke up in the hospital, he said that he saw his daughter walking around with one of the intruders, and she was not tied up. So, again, a number of reasons to be suspicious. The police lied to Jennifer during the interrogation using what is referred to as the Reid technique. They made it seem as though they had information they did not have. The Reid technique is used in many places. In some other jurisdictions, it is banned. It's essentially this tactic where the police directly confront the suspect. Again, they make it seem like they have information they don't. They try to empathize with the suspect. And as the suspect goes through different stages, they employ different tactics to try to elicit a confession. It's kind of a strong-arm technique. It also includes getting really close to the suspect, staring at them, and kind of yelling at them. I think in this case it's actually ironic that something like the Reid technique was used. Jennifer Pan's life was characterized by a lot of deceptive behavior, and here we see the police trying to deceive her. So if it's a slippery slope, if lies are a bad idea because they lead to worse human behavior, is it a good idea to encourage law enforcement officers to deceive citizens? So are the police going to ask a question and somebody's going to be skeptical and the police are going to say, no, we're telling the truth now. But sometimes we don't tell the truth. It's really an impossible situation. I don't see how communities can trust law enforcement if they're not obligated to be honest. So I know that getting confessions is important, and I realize that it solves a lot of criminal cases, but it comes at a high cost. I mean, if we look at Jennifer Pan's situation, her lying led to a benefit for her for a while. She got to be with her boyfriend. She was supported by her parents. She didn't have to worry about school. But in the end, everything really did not work out well at all. We see one person murdered and another seriously injured, and many other people in prison for what may be their entire lives. So again, I think we see irony in this situation. The police are fighting fire with fire, but they think they can control that fire. They think they're immune to all the shortcomings of deceptive behavior. The reality is they're not. We've seen many false confessions come about from using the Reid technique. I don't think it's really a good idea for this technique to be used. I think that even though one could look at specific circumstances and say, oh, it's great, we have this person confessing, and we caught them, and otherwise we may not have caught them, I think that the other problems associated with the Reid technique and deception in general really outweigh those benefits. So just at a mathematical level, it's not a good idea. It comes with too high a cost for the limited benefit. So I think it really just causes distrust and undermines the community's relationships with police departments. But either way, it was used in this case. And we see that eventually Jennifer did confess to hiring the intruders, but she said they were supposed to kill her, and things got mixed up when she tried to call it off, and they ended up killing her parents instead. After her confession, she was arrested. This, of course, was 2010. David, Eric, and Daniel were arrested in April of 2011, and Lenford was arrested in May of 2011. Jennifer, David, Lenford, and Daniel were convicted in December of 2014. They each received the same sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. It's interesting because it's been reported that Daniel Wong's favorite color was orange, so perhaps things really worked out for him in this case. Eric actually ended up with a different result because his lawyer became sick during the trial. Therefore, a mistrial was declared. Eric pleaded guilty to conspiring to commit murder and was sentenced to 18 years in prison in December of 2015. He was eligible for parole after 9 years for that conviction. The problem here is that he had another murder conviction unrelated to this case. Either way, though, he ended up dying in his prison cell in April of 2018. Now moving to the mental health and personality factors. First, I'll take a look at Jennifer's potential personality profile based on the descriptions that we see in various reports. When I conceptualize personality, I use the 5-factor model. I remember the big 5 traits through the acronym OCEAN: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So as far as openness to experience, it looks like Jennifer's level was fairly high. She was creative, she appreciated art, and she was intellectually curious. As far as conscientiousness, we see her level was mid-range to low. She was not particularly cautious or organized. She had a high level of extroversion. She was excitement-seeking, friendly, and outgoing. We see mid-range agreeableness. She was trusting, but she did not comply with the rules. And with neuroticism, we see that her level was probably higher than average. There are reports indicating she was depressed, anxious, and emotionally reactive. It also seems like she had difficulty resisting temptation. Jennifer had a long history of deception. Some would consider it to rise to the level of pathological lying. It's not really clear why she started lying. Did her parents put pressure on her and she did not want to let them down? Did she simply do what she wanted to do and no one was going to get in her way? A number of her lies did seem to facilitate her being with Daniel. Or was she simply predisposed to being deceptive? There's no way to know, but either way we did see an incredibly high level of deceptive behavior. The primary tension in her life really did seem to revolve around her parents' will versus her will, and maybe to some extent what her parents believed she could do versus what she could actually accomplish. It seemed like the parents just couldn't accept her decisions and capabilities, and she couldn't accept their decisions. The tension was building, and someone was going to lose. So this was a bad situation where the parties wanted different things, and no one was backing down. Now, it's interesting here because Jennifer could have moved out. She didn't have to live with her parents. So this wasn't just about freedom. It was about freedom while retaining all the benefits of living with her parents, like the financial benefits. This led to the idea of murder. If she could get away with murder, she could have money and her relationship with Daniel. In addition to the lying behavior and this discrepancy between her parents' goals and her goals, we see that Jennifer manifested characteristics of narcissism. She idealized the romantic relationship with Daniel. She didn't want to accept that he had found someone else. On November 2, 6 days before the murder, Daniel and Jennifer were texting. He said that he really wanted to be with Christine. Jennifer said they should call it off, right? So the murder should not go forward. Now, eventually, they started flirting again, but I find it interesting that without Daniel, Jennifer really wasn't interested in going through with the plan. So for her, the romance component, the relationship, was important. Jennifer somehow believed that she could piece together this assortment of criminals to commit what was, from her point of view, a double parricide. And somehow, everything would work out fine. They would never get arrested later on, where the police could connect them to the attack. There would not be a later disagreement between the co-conspirators, compelling one of them to run to the police and confess. She was exceptionally naive to the point of investing in fantasy. And I think that's what really happened in this case. She idealized the romantic relationship. She formed this image of an ideal progression, including access to financial resources, and she just could not or would not see reality. This fantasy combined with the sense of entitlement that she had and her self-centeredness, which facilitated her plotting to commit murder. It's likely that the same thing happened with Daniel, although he had a history of other criminal activity, so it's hard to know. As far as the other co-conspirators, they could have been motivated by money or perhaps the excitement of carrying out the attack. Jennifer also displayed a number of characteristics of psychopathy in addition to the deceptive behavior, like a lack of empathy, coldness, a tendency to be manipulative, impulsivity, and a failure to take responsibility. One example that really stands out is how she was able to walk around with the killers right before the murder. One would think that she would have been extremely upset at what was about to happen. Her parents were going to be killed, or so she thought. She thought, of course, both of them would be killed, not just her mother. But she didn't seem upset. She was focused on the task at hand. So right there at that moment, when most people would have had empathy, even people who were fairly cold, she didn't. Now, many people believe that her parents' strictness greatly contributed to this crime. But I think this was really about the romantic relationship with Daniel. She lied to her parents to keep it. She lied to him to preserve it. It's like she was willing to do anything not to lose him. Now, when looking at the research literature, I really focused on double parricide because it's clear that Jennifer intended for both of her parents to be killed. It's incredible that Han survived, but that was not the expected result. She certainly intended to cause their death. So in terms of understanding her mindset, I don't think of it as a matricide, but rather a double parricide. The word parricide technically means killing a close relative, but it's almost always used to mean killing one's parents. So matricide is killing one's mother, patricide is killing one's father, and parricide is killing a parent. It's extremely rare to see a female commit double parricide. Almost all double parricides are committed by sons. In one study that looked at 35 double parricides that had occurred over a period of 20 years, 96% of the perpetrators were sons. The reason that there were only 35 cases is because that's all they could find, right? So again, a rare event. Now it's interesting here with this particular double parricide. This is even more rare because a normal double parricide involves one offender. This was a multiple offender double parricide. So most perpetrators of double parricides act alone. Jennifer Pan did not act alone. She conspired with 4 other people. In that study I'm referring to, only 6 of the 35 cases were multi-offender double parricides. Only 3 of those involved a possible motive of monetary gain. Parricidal offenders in general are almost always psychotic. So whether they are single offenders or the offense involves multiple offenders, the person who is the son or the daughter of the victims is usually psychotic. Although there have been a few cases where the perpetrator had strong antisocial tendencies without psychosis. I'm not aware of any evidence indicating that Jennifer Pan was psychotic. One could argue that her narcissistic fantasy rose to the level of being delusional, but there's no evidence of traditional psychosis here. There was another famous case from 2003. There was a 16-year-old named Sarah Marie Johnson who killed both of her parents with a rifle. Her parents did not approve of her boyfriend. It was alleged that he was involved in selling illegal substances. So we see a few similarities to the Jennifer Pan case. So stepping back and looking at this terrible case, what caused this? It was probably caused by a combination of factors. A young woman who was deceptive on a regular basis for many years, a young romance fueled by passion as opposed to common sense, characteristics of narcissism and psychopathy, and the availability of conspirators, which is actually pretty scary. It was incredibly easy for her to find all these people willing to commit homicide. As far as these sentences, other than Eric Carty, who of course, as I mentioned, is dead already, all these offenders could get out of prison after serving just 25 years. I think for any of them to be released, they would have to demonstrate a phenomenal level of rehabilitation, which I don't think is really a expected outcome. This crime involved such a profound lack of empathy that it's just really hard to believe that they could be rehabilitated. But it's possible. So I think the sentence is fair if they serve 25 years and they have been rehabilitated quite a bit and then they're released. But I would probably feel more comfortable if they all serve life in prison. Again, it's just such a serious crime. It's hard to picture a sentence less than life in prison. The last question I'll look at is, was this preventable? I don't think there's anything that could have been done to prevent this from the perspective of Han and Bick. I think that to imagine that a daughter could conspire with all these people and commit murder, it's just so improbable. That's not really a reasonable way to think about these situations. If they did have suspicions, I don't think anybody would have believed them. I guess what they could have done was kicked Jennifer out. But again, that seems like an overreaction based on the probabilities. Even still, Jennifer did escalate to murder. So perhaps there were some warning signs that we're not aware of, things that she said or did that they could have picked up on. Overall, though, I don't think this was something that society can really view as preventable. This was just a rare case that, for whatever reason, happens from time to time. Perhaps one of the many risks associated with young love. We see a lot of passion, but also a lot of impulsivity and narcissism. So those are my thoughts about the Jennifer Pan case. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.